The Toronto Maple Leafs may have had the biggest roster turnover when you compare the roster before free agency to afterwards. There was a ton of departures, including the likes of Ryan O'Reilly, Noel Acciari, and Luke Schenn, who were all deadline additions for the Maple Leafs this past season. However, it did not take Brad Treliving long to go out and make some key signings, replenish the roster a little bit after all those departures. So one question that I've been seeing a lot in the comments on Twitter is, did the Toronto Maple Leafs get better or did they get worse? And that is the main question we are going to center this video around. We're going to take a look at everyone the Leafs brought in, everyone that left. I'll give my thoughts on each individual signing the Leafs made. We will also take a look at some line projections heading into next season, and towards the end of the video, I'm going to give you guys my take on if I think the team got better or worse. As always, I want to know your guys' thoughts, especially if you're a Maple Leafs fan, so let me know how you're feeling down below. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel, then hit that subscribe button if you want more NHL content just like this. So with that said, let's go ahead and start off by looking at the Maple Leafs free agency as a whole. Players that decided to sign elsewhere: Ryan O'Reilly, Michael Bunting, Noel Acciari, Luke Schenn, Erik Gustafsson, Justin Holl, and Alex Kerfoot. For the most part, those are all players that were NHL regulars with the Toronto Maple Leafs this past season, with the exception of Erik Gustafsson, who was a healthy scratch more often than not down the stretch, only got into a couple playoff games. Now for the players that Brad Treliving decided to bring in: Tyler Bertuzzi, John Klingberg, Max Domi, Ryan Reaves, and Dylan Gambrell. I think it's absolutely hilarious that the only one of those players that actually got any term on their contract was Ryan Reaves. Now, I do think there is a good reason for that. Players like Klingberg, Domi, and Bertuzzi especially know that the salary cap is going to jump by a pretty significant amount next offseason. There's going to be a lot more money to go around than there was this summer, so I think it's a safe bet to go to a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs on a one-year deal, get an opportunity to play with some really talented guys, probably inflate your stats a little bit, and then cash in next offseason. But now I want to go through the Leafs signings one by one, and I'll kind of tell you guys how I'm feeling about each signing. First off, Dylan Gambrell, not really a whole lot to unpack here. He was brought in on a one-year deal worth $775K. 26-year-old right shot centerman. He's a depth forward, probably not someone who's going to be in the Leafs lineup every single night, more of a 13th, 14th forward kind of deal, some injury insurance down the middle. Gambrell has got NHL experience, has a total of 233 games played between the Ottawa Senators and the San Jose Sharks. Worst comes to worst, this is a contract that's variable in the AHL, so it's going to be non-consequential one way or the other. Moving on to the next signing, Ryan Reaves was brought in on a 3-year deal worth a total of $4.05 million. That is an AAV of $1.35 million. If you watched my video going over the best and worst signings from free agency so far, I had Ryan Reaves in that video as one of the worst signings. My reasoning for that is I just don't think you should be giving 3-year deals worth anything more than league min to, 36-year-old fourth-line enforcers. Now, I honestly feel like Ryan Reaves was brought in more so to help with the off-ice side of things than on ice. Ryan Reaves is obviously a big personality, very popular locker room guy. Based off of everything we know, apparently the Leafs locker room, not much fun to be in over the past couple of seasons, so I do think Ryan Reaves should definitely help with that. But as far as the on-ice side of things goes, this is a guy who doesn't make your team better. He's probably not even going to play every single night. When he does, he'll probably play less than 10 minutes, take a penalty, fight somebody. That's just what Ryan Reaves does. There's no doubt about it, though. He is going to be a fan favorite in Toronto. Moving on now to the next signing, Max Domi was brought in on a one-year deal worth $3 million, identical to the deal he signed with the Chicago Blackhawks last offseason. Max Domi is coming off of a very strong season. When you look at his offensive production, 56 points in 80 games between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Dallas Stars. This is a player that I feel like Leafs fans have wanted for a couple of seasons now. I think this is a great signing, especially given the fact that it's just a one-year deal. There's not a lot of risk involved for the Maple Leafs, and I think it's a really good signing for Max Domi as well. He's more likely than not going to be playing in a top 6 role. Maybe that's with Tavares and Nylander, or with Matthews and Marner, of course, under the assumption that those 4 guys are still going to be Leafs when next season begins. If Domi sticks in a top 6 role on the Maple Leafs, I would not be surprised to see him put up offensive numbers similar to what he did in Montreal back in 18-19, where he had a career-high 72 points. He's a real solid playmaker, can play center in a pinch, but ideally I feel like Toronto's bringing him in to be a top 6 winger, and obviously Domi is a guy who is annoying as hell to play against. He doesn't hit a lot, he's not overly physical, but after the whistle is really where he tries to get under the other team's skin. He's a pest. Based on all the signings that the Maple Leafs made during free agency so far, I definitely feel like Brad Treliving, one of his main goals was to make this team not as much fun to play against. Guys like Ryan Reaves, Max Domi, and of course one other player who we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes certainly help with that. Moving along now to the next signing, right shot defenseman John Klingberg was brought in on a one-year deal with a cap hit of $4.15 million. This is a signing that I'm kind of iffy on. It's not like it's going to have any long-term impacts on the Maple Leafs because it is just a one-year deal, but I really don't know if John Klingberg is the kind of defenseman that the Leafs need based on the current way the roster is constructed. John Klingberg is the embodiment of an offensive defenseman. He's a great puck mover, very talented in the offensive zone, great offensive awareness, but he doesn't defend. You already have somebody like Morgan Rielly on the roster who is kind of the same mold, albeit I think Morgan Rielly is a much better defender than John Klingberg is. So I definitely have my concerns about this signing, but I also do see a scenario where this could work really well. Like I mentioned, Klingberg is a fantastic puck mover. He's going to have some really talented forwards up there to move the puck to. Would not be surprised at all if we see Klingberg put up 50 plus points this season with the Maple Leafs. If he can at least just be serviceable defensively, I think this will be looked at as a really good signing, but I'm not sure how much faith I have in his ability to do that based off of the past couple of seasons. And now for the final key signing made by the Maple Leafs, Tyler Bertuzzi was brought in on a one-year deal with a cap hit of $5.5 million. This is an amazing signing. Tyler Bertuzzi basically directly replaces what they are losing with Michael Bunting signing in Carolina. You get a guy who I expect to play on the top line with Matthews and Marner. Obviously, Bertuzzi plays a similar style to Michael Bunting in the sense that they're both pests. They're going to get under the other team's skin. They're not fun to play against. Now, that being said, I do feel like Bertuzzi is a pretty significant upgrade over Michael Bunting, a much more talented offensive player in my opinion. We saw how fantastic of a fit Tyler Bertuzzi was with the Boston Bruins, how well he played for them down the stretch, and especially in the first round of the playoffs. Prying Bertuzzi away from a division rival like Boston is always a bonus as well. This is a guy who's had a 30-goal, 62-point season in just 68 games with the Red Wings in 2021-22. That was on a very bad Red Wings team. If Bertuzzi sticks on one of those top two lines, I honestly would not be surprised to see him put up 80-plus points. If he can stay healthy, of course, which is definitely, where a lot of the concern comes from Leafs fans when it comes to the signing. Tyler Bertuzzi over the past couple of seasons does have a lot of injury history, but it's not like the Leafs locked him up to a 5 or 6 year deal. It's just a one-year contract, so even if he is injured for the majority of the season, which obviously we're all hoping he's not, it wouldn't be the end of the world. The Maple Leafs now have the ability to roll out a line with Tyler Bertuzzi on it, then have Domi on another line and Ryan Reeves on another line. Like I mentioned, I really feel like Brad Treliving made it a point to make this team a lot less fun to play against and didn't want to do it at the expense of, skill and offense. And with Bertuzzi and Domi, you get two skill guys who are pesky, who are going to get it under the other team's skin. Obviously, Ryan Reeves is a little bit different. He is, pure goon. But again, it was clear to me that Brad Treliving definitely wanted to change up the identity of the Maple Leafs a little bit, and I definitely think he did that. So those are my thoughts on all of the key signings the Maple Leafs have made so far during free agency. Now I want to shift focus and take a look at their projected lines heading into this season. Obviously, these lines aren't going to be perfect. I'm just using dailyfaceoff.com's line projections here. So maybe just think of it more as like a depth chart, but looking at the forwards first, you have Bertuzzi, Matthews, Marner. I think that has all the potential in the world to be one of the best lines in the entire league. Second line, you got Max Domi, John Tavares, and William Nylander. Matthew Nyes, David Kampf, and Yarncroke on the third line, and then Lafferty, Pontus Holmberg, and Ryan Reeves on the fourth. And then you still have guys like Gambrell and Bobby McMahon, who might be, the 13th or 14th forwards. I'll say this, I honestly feel like the Maple Leafs top 9, if it does look something like this, might be the best top 9 that they've had with the core 4. I feel like they were always missing one key piece. Sometimes you had Kerfoot playing wing in the top 6. Sometimes it was Calle Yarncroke, who I think did a fine job, but it felt like they were always one winger away from really completing that top 6. And now you have guys like Bertuzzi and Domi, and also Matthew Nyes, who I wouldn't be surprised if he plays in a top 6 role. Maybe you move Domi down to the third line. Whatever they end up doing, it's going to be a very deadly forward group. Obviously, probably not going to get much offense, if any at all, from that fourth line, but when your top 3 lines have as much offensive talent on them like this, I don't think that matters. Moving on now, let's now take a look at the projected defense pairings. You have Riley Brody, McCabe, Klingberg, and Giordano and Liljegren in net. I have Samsonov and Wall because I don't see a scenario where Matt Murray is on the Leafs next season unless he's on the LTIR. And then I also have Connor Timmins there because he's somebody you can definitely slide into the lineup. He's an NHL caliber defenseman. I'm going to come right out and say this. I feel like the defense did get worse. I really feel like the Maple Leafs are going to miss Luke Schenn, who did a really good job playing with Morgan Rielly. As I mentioned when talking about the signing, I have my concerns about Klingberg's game and how he's going to fit with the Maple Leafs and for what they need. Mark Giordano's 1 year older, and as we saw during the playoffs, there were times where he got exposed. I don't think this D-core looks awful by any means, but I do feel like it's a step back from, what we saw in the playoffs, especially depth-wise. If the Leafs, get a couple of injuries to key guys on the back end, things could definitely start to look ugly. Now, obviously, there's still so much time left in the offseason. I don't really see them making any more free agency signings or any key ones, but they they could definitely make some trades. So of course this roster might look a little bit different come opening night, but for the most part, I feel like this is what things are going to look like. So now comes the question, did the Maple Leafs get better or worse? I have a hard time saying that they got worse because really the only players that left that I feel like they're really going to miss are Ryan O'Reilly, Noel Acciari, and Luke Schenn. Some of you might say, well, what about Michael Bunting? I don't think they're going to miss him at all because I feel like you get a better version of that player in Tyler Bertuzzi. They certainly lost a good amount of depth at the center position, losing both O'Reilly and Acciari, but when you have Matthews and Tavares as your number 1 and number 2 centers, I feel like they'll definitely survive. On paper, I think maybe you can say they got a little bit worse, but I really love the Bertuzzi signing especially. I like the Domi signing. I think the Klingberg signing has potential, albeit I have my concerns. So that's kind of where I'm at. Again, I'm really interested to hear what you guys think, especially if you're a fan of the Maple Leafs. Let me know how you're feeling down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. That's the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all summer long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all soon.